As we prepare for Season 5 of the Amazing Build series and the release of Elatreon, we have to remember that not all hunters have access to the same gear, weapons, and especially jewels. So I'm Darcblade with a budget build for the Sword and Shield in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now the main purpose of a budget build is to provide a build for newer hunters who do not have access to a large jewel collection. Thus the builds featured in these videos make use of a lot of alpha armor pieces that should allow newer players to farm jewels for their collection. The budget build I'm recommending for the Sword and Shield is a highly versatile, high DPS build that makes use of high affinity and ultimately the Master's Touch set bonus. So for this build you'll need the Garuga Helm Alpha, the Kirin Jacket Alpha, Kaiser Vambraces Alpha, Kaiser Coil Alpha, and the Kaiser Greaves Alpha. I'm also using an Attack Charm 5, although this could be an Attack Charm 4 depending on how far you've got through the game, and for my weapon I'm using the Booming Barrage, which is the Brachydios Sword and Shield. And if you have access to augmentations, I'd recommend a health regen augmentation, an affinity increase augmentation, and then a status effect up augmentation. As for the specialist tools, these are down to personal preference. Now as for the jewels, now remember the idea behind budget builds is it's for players who do not have access to a large jewel collection. However, I am using some jewels, but these are normally easier jewels to obtain and they're not that rare. So for this build, I'd recommend going for Vitality jewels for the health boost skill, Protection jewels for the Divine Blessing skill, and Expert jewels if you have them to max out the Critical Eye skill. Of course, if you do not have access to these jewels, you can simply replace them with other jewels in your collection. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You have an attack of 392 with white sharpness. You have 55% base affinity, which can be 100% affinity, so long as you're attacking monster weak points that have been tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. You have a high blast rating of 560 with a decent defense of 1003. That is strong against thunder, fire and dragon, but unfortunately weak to water and ice. Now as for the skills, you've got a few of them here. First is Critical Eye at level 7. Critical Eye is a skill that increases your base affinity. We've managed to get it to level 7 thanks to the jewels we have, but if not, it will still be fairly high, even without expert jewels. Next up you have Attack Boost at level 5. Attack Boost is a skill that increases the raw attack of a build, and at level 4 or above, it will also provide us with an extra bonus 5% affinity. You have a Blast Attack of level 4, which increases the blast rating and build up of the ailment, allowing us to proc the blast explosions more often during a hunt. You have Health Boost level 3, allowing our health to get to a maximum of 200. You have Weakness Exploit level 3. Weakness Exploit is a skill that increases our affinity so long as we're attacking monster weak points. And should these weak points be tenderized through clutch claw attacks first, this increase to our affinity can be up to 50% with Weakness Exploit at level 3. The Sword and Shield is one of the rare light weapons that can tenderize monster body parts in one hit so long as you're performing the claw uppercut move, so it can really take advantage of Weakness Exploit. Anyway, you have Divine Blessing at level 3, a nice defensive and quality of life skill that allows us potentially to take reduced damage when we take a hit from a monster. You also have Latent Power level 2, a byproduct of the armor we're wearing but can still be useful. Latent Power is a buff that kicks in when you've taken enough damage from a monster or you've been fighting a monster for a set amount of time. When this buff kicks in, you'll gain bonus affinity as well as reduced stamina consumption. You'll also have Heat Guard at level 1, preventing any damage when you're in hot areas such as the lava zones in the Guiding Lands or Elder's Recess. And finally for the skills you'll have Resentment level 1. Resentment is a byproduct of the armor we're wearing, but it's still useful. Basically when we have a red portion of health on our health bar, we'll gain increased raw attack. But anyway, as for the set bonus, you only have one of them, which is Teostra's Technique, Master's Touch, which prevents any sharpness loss on our weapon when we crit a monster. And as this build has the potential to reach 100% affinity, you should see next to no sharpness loss whatsoever with this build, allowing you to continue longer hunts without having to stop and sharpen your weapon all the time. So there we have it, that's the Sword and Shield budget build I'd recommend. But of course, all builds out there, even the greatest ones, have pros and cons. With the Master's Touch Sword and Shield budget build, its greatest pro is its DPS output. Thanks to having Critical Eye, Attack Boost, Blast Attack and Weakness Exploit, you're able to deal a decent amount of damage, making hunts go a little bit more quickly. On top of that, it's a build that doesn't really have to worry about sharpness whatsoever. This is because Master's Touch combined with the high affinity we have. And then finally, again, it's a build that can be pretty much taken against any monster. Yes, if the monster is weak to the blast ailment, then this build is going to be more powerful. But even monsters who are resistant to the blast ailment can still be affected by it slightly. So you can see this build as another universal build. But alas, there are cons. The biggest con for this build is its lack of handicraft, and if you were to use a different weapon that required handicraft in order to get to purple or even white sharpness, then it's going to struggle. And the final con for this build is that if you did want to swap your weapon out for a different ailment or even element, you're going to have the blast attack at level 4 regardless, as it's built into the armor we are using. Thus this build is kind of restricted to using blast weaponry, so that's something to be aware of. But regardless, this is a fun universal sword and shield build that I like to use and would strongly recommend for a budget build. But that's the budget build for the sword and shield. Of course, as you farm more and more, hunters will get more gear, weaponry, and expand their jewel collection. When this happens, I hope the other builds featured in the amazing build series will come in useful. So until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you a budget build for the sword and shield I use in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Hope you enjoyed the little video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.